we have more and more organizations that have seen a rise in profits, a rise in market share, a rise in creativity and innovation during the pandemic. Why they're deciding to, oh no, that was just a moment in time, like we were just sort of surviving. We don't feel we want to operate like that going forward. Everyone get back in here. And to me, it's a real missed opportunity because any consulting firm in the world will tell you right now that agility and adaptability is the superpower of the future. All these models we've been using are all built around consistency, reliability, and predictability. That is not a good strategy in a world that's less and less predictable. And it's more about how do I thrive in uncertainty and instability? Businesses are saying, we think you're more productive at work when you're in the office. Candidates and employees are saying, no, I'm more productive at home. But I think what they're really saying, my life is more productive when I'm home. And you're making as much money, if not more, as O'Leary says, in this new realm. Why are you so loath to give that, hang on to that? Why do you want to give that up so quickly?
My goal here, Steve, is to take the information you have, empower managers, empower workers to go to their boss or the C-suite and say, hey guys, this is what is out there. This is the evidence. This is the research that will get us better retention, that will make the bottom line better. It is going to take some new muscle memory for some organizations, but it can be done. There was a lot of that changed since you started writing the Workquake book. What's going on, Steve?
So what I'm trying to do with this next book is
You're listening to
Welcome to What the Tech, your gateway to business strategies and tech secrets shaping today's workplace. Coming to you from the Blue Room in Loudoun County, Virginia, is Rolando over here in this square.
Always laugh at the Blue Room jokes. I don't quite know why. I think it has something to do with the school that I went to growing up. But listen, Rolando, Dave Kelly reporting from Southern New Hampshire. Listen, I could hardly contain your excitement today. Why?
Yeah, well, we did a lot of work for Steve Cadigan, formerly of LinkedIn. He's tied, actually, for most appearances on the show with a good friend of the show as well, Neil Flooster. And I was just telling Steve before we came on, I would love to have him on a monthly basis because stuff is changing so fast when it comes to work. And if you really want to know what's going on from a person that's in the trenches, that's also in the C-suite, talking to folks at that level, this is the guy. This is the guy that can give us the mindset of what's happening there and why companies are doing the things they're doing or reacting the way they're reacting. So if I were in the CIA, he'd be my ace intel officer gathering intel.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to this discussion with Steve today, given his everything he's been up to lately. I think he's also writing a new book, and I'd love to hear more about his new book. His first one, Future of Work, Workquake, was amazing. I read it from cover to cover, and I can't wait to see what he says about what he's writing now. So, where do you want to start, Dave?
Hey man, bring Steve on, and then we can kind of go from there.
All right, and so let's bring Steve on. If you have been under a rock, Ori, do we have an intro for Steve, or should I just? There we go. Steve Cadigan. He is talent guru, author, keynote speaker. You can find all kinds of information about Steve and his writings and his speaking at stevecadigan.com. He is formerly of LinkedIn. He, as I said earlier, is clued in, plugged in, and speaks regularly with folks in the C-suite to advise them on all matters workplace, how to get that optimized, how to better recruit, how to engage with employees in this new era. If you want somebody in your corner to help you, to give you a roadmap for where you need to be and where the future of work is going, Steve Cadigan is the guy. So let's bring out of the green room, back on the show for a third appearance, Steve Cadigan.
Rolando, Dave, good to see you guys again.
Dude, great to have you back. Great to have you back.
Steve, I genuinely love talking to you. I really do. I don't, you know that. I tell you that, and we communicate every so often. I know that you were on a road tour or a press tour or speaking tour this summer, and I know you've been very busy since writing your book or your first book. And I know everything has changed since the last time we talked, and for sure since the first time you came on the show.
Yeah, it just it is exciting, but it's scary at the same time how fast things and how many things are changing, right?
Absolutely. You know, since you and I started talking, this was 2021 when you came on. One of the things that I've been wanting to do and more recently finally been able to do is talk to people that can give me information from research, folks that are actually researching and studying this. And so I recently had a conversation with economist and professor at Stanford, Nick Bloom, right in your backyard. And he had a lot of research around the topic of remote work, future of work, winners and losers. And he's going to be on a future episode, and we're going to release that in the future. So you'll be able to see his whole conversation, as well as Dr. Ellen Frank Miller, formerly of Washington University. Both of these individuals, they cited several studies, research going back years, as well as current, that all pretty much say the same thing. Research says remote work, work flexibility is good for the bottom line. It's good for the worker. It's good for the employer. It's good for the culture. And which that last point is what a lot of the pushback on return to office, and we're going to get into return to office in a moment, a lot of the pushback is on culture, but I don't hear any of the big tech companies right now that are really mandating, as well as the financial firms, saying anything about profitability being impacted negatively when it comes to remote work. The discussion has squarely been focused on something you can't, I guess you can't, but you'll fill me in. Can you measure culture? Can you measure the impact of culture as the way they're describing return to office and its negative impact, or remote work and its negative impact on work culture? So we're going to jump into that and chew that up a bit today.
Great.
All right.
So as we talk about the future of work, listen, we need to also talk about technology that supports future of work. And if you're tired of getting late night telephone calls from clients and business partners disrupting your much needed rest, we all know the struggle. You know, that happens, especially if you're a salesperson using your personal number for work. But guess what? There's a solution that can help you regain the night. Introducing Zoom Phone, the ultimate game changer for professionals just like you. With Zoom Phone, you can seamlessly manage your online meetings and phone calls all in one place. So say goodbye to those midnight interruptions and hello to uninterrupted slumber. Zoom Phone allows you that freedom. So if you want to work with the best partner in the business, make sure you check out globaltech.com. That's globaltech.com/Zoom. Setting it up is as easy as 1, 2, 3. You can work with us. We can provide you with some pricing, some options, and we can help customize it for your business. Also, a quick shout out to a past guest of ours. Big props to Dan Smolin. Dan, we love you out there. He's the author, executive producer, and host of What's Your Work Fit? He does a weekly podcast. He streams live on LinkedIn. He joined us back in March where we were discussing similar topics about future of work and dismantling the 40-hour work week. So if you want to learn more from another expert in the field, please check out our podcast with Dan and others at circuitloops.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. So let's jump into this with Mr. Steve Cadigan. Steve, you know the drill around here. We don't just do conversation, but just for the sake of talking. I want you to look at this clip. Got to do with return to office. Go ahead and roll that, Ori.
Mandating its workers return to the office.
Return to the office.
To return to the office. Return to office.
Back into the office. Back to the office.
Even Zoom, the company this is, now throwing in the towel on fully remote work. The company that cashed in on the digital work revolution is now requiring most employees to work in person.
What is going on, Steve? These are the tech titans that are talking about stuff that's completely opposite of what we knew they would want to do about a year ago or 2 years ago, especially when they're putting out solutions that enable workers to do all this stuff from home.
That's right. Isn't that the irony? And Zoom was probably the biggest one, right? That got
Absolutely
everyone riled up. The way you're profiting from this, shouldn't you be a model for how to leverage that technology more effectively. And I think it comes down to pretty simple human nature on one level, which is most schools have taught us, most experiences, most organizations have taught us, and we've all built models to learn how to thrive and succeed when we are together. Okay. How you build teams, it's all based on being together physically. How buildings have been designed have all been about that. How organizations have run, how they've planned, how they've built budgets, how they've built financial plans has all originated with that in mind. And so what we're seeing right now post-pandemic is for the first time in the lives of all of us, we got to taste a different world. And I call it the biology of work was just different. And what biologists will tell you is when you fundamentally change the biology of any creature for an extended period of time, the capacity for it to return to doing and living and behaving the way it used to is often radically, it's almost impossible to go back to that because they've been reshaped or they've been experiencing different things. And so I feel sorry for a lot of business leaders because they have a lot of confidence that we know how to deliver value in person. We have no prolonged evidence that we can do this over an extended period, thrive in a more remote team environment. Okay. So that I'm sort of advocating for what I think is their point of view. Like my job's on the line as an executive. I know I can deliver when we're all together. I don't know that we can deliver when we're apart for an extended period. And I don't know the long-term implications for teamwork, trust, and culture. And so get back in here, people, and there's, I'm sad and I'm surprised by some of the leadership decisions on this one, because as you point out, Rolando and Dave, we have more and more organizations that have seen a rise in profits, a rise in market share, a rise in, creativity and innovation during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And so why they're deciding to, oh no, that was just a moment in time. Like we were just sort of surviving. We don't feel we want to operate like that going forward. Everyone get back in here. And to me, it's a real missed opportunity because any consulting firm in the world will tell you right now that agility and adaptability is the superpower of the future, right?
100%.
All these models we've been using are all built around consistency, reliability, and predictability. But that is not a good strategy in a world that's less and less predictable. And it's more about how do I thrive in uncertainty and instability? And that's why I'm really sad to see so many people throw in the towel so quickly.
Right. And you know what? What would you say? If I were to paraphrase a little bit what you're saying, we don't really have muscle memory, right? I'm going to use a sports term. We don't have muscle memory for that, right? As a society on a big scale, on scale. This was already going on a smaller scale. Some upper level managers were doing remote work. Maybe some executives taking time off or traveling. They did some remote work. But filtering it down to the entry level worker, even down to the call center worker that's working remotely in a long period of time, that is a new concept. But I want to take what you just said about profitability. I want to bring out somebody that does work with 56 companies. He recently had an interview and he had this to say about profitability. Go ahead, Ori, roll that.
I have 54 companies in almost every state, in almost every sector. We now know what the percentage is. It's just under 40% are never coming back to the office. I was very fortunate in a portfolio basis to make 15% free cash flow pre-tax. Today, that same portfolio, post-pandemic, with 40% of the staff working remotely all around the world, is going to do 17.5% free cash. That's a 20% increase in free cash flow. So you can't tell me this doesn't work. In fact, I want to do more of this because I'm reducing my costs of real estate.
Now, this is a guy who's a shark, right? Mr. Wonderful. This is a numbers guy. This is a venture guy. This is a VC guy. This is a guy that counts every penny in his organizations. What does he know that others don't quite see the same way?
What's interesting about him in particular, Rolando, is that if we go deeper into clips about him talking about this during the pandemic, he was a holdout. He was not converted
Absolutely.
at all. And then he had a couple of big things that happened to him that really reshaped his thinking, I think, which is he hired a CFO who he never met, hired this woman remotely, and she starts getting onboarded and figuring it out and so forth. And I think what he sees is, and he's got the good fortune of having a diverse portfolio and also struggling with recruiting and retention concerns. A lot of his team members were saying, I'm not coming back, so see you later. And he's like, whoa, why?
Good.
And they're saying, because I tasted that flexibility in my life. And I tasted being home when my kids get home from school, or I tasted not having that commute. And my life is more productive. And this is where I'm trying to help both parties in this conversation talk about the same thing, because businesses are saying, we think you're more productive at work when you're in the office. And I think candidates and employees are saying, no, I'm more productive at home. But I think what they're really saying, candidates and employees, is my life is more productive when I'm home, right? And I can blend it. And you're making as much money, if not more, as O'Leary says, in this new realm. Why are you so loath to give that, hang on to that? Why do you want to give that up so quickly? And I don't have, and every organization's facing a different metric with that. I do believe, having been at LinkedIn for some crazy hyper growth years, I struggle to see when you're going through some really hard times and you've got massive competitors coming at you really quickly. I'm struggle to see how you can innovate and create and build teams when you're in a battle for market share or to get your feet on the ground and stand up a company. I'm struggling to see how you can do that when people aren't together a lot, And so in different phases and different evolutions, I think there may be a requirement. But what's also interesting about O'Leary's portfolio is I don't think he had a lot of new organizations that were growing and hiring a ton of people. He had incumbent teams that had been around a while. And that's a very different dynamic when you've got a group of people that was together.
Why is that? Why is that, Steve?
Right?
If you have an incumbent group that's been around, what's the difference? They're people at the end of the day. But so tell us, what's the difference there?
Yeah. I think the difference is if you were together and went hybrid versus you were together, went hybrid, and you hired a bunch of new people, I think you've got the muscle memory because you've been together. You sort of know what the culture is. You know what the drill is. You have the trust and rapport. But when you've got an organization that has grown a lot during the pandemic, you've onboarded a lot of new people, they don't know, quote, the way or the culture in the same way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a different dynamic. We all approached this remote work from a different perspective. Some teams had been together a long time. Some teams were growing. And there's very different dynamics, I think, that are touching that. So it's not the discussion of hybrid isn't so simple, right? I put it like this. If you want to talk about hybrid as a category, it's like going to a restaurant and the waiter says, can I take your order? And you say, yeah, I'd like some food. And the waiter or waitress is like, you want some food? Yeah, I knew that. Do you want cold food, hot food, fresh food, vegan food, meat food? Like, what do you want? So hybrid is, what is hybrid? What is remote? Is it 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week? Is it we're meeting in an office, we're meeting in a remote place, we're, getting to like what teams are coming in, what teams aren't coming in is such a complex notion that
definitely one size doesn't fit all in this space of hybrid and remote work, because the dynamics are different in every organization. I mean, I worked for Altria, a Fortune 100 company, and we were remote from the moment you started working. And all 5,000 salespeople in the organization, including district managers, they were also all remote in 1997. Procter & Gamble, similar dynamics. Xerox, similar dynamics. And to some extent, IBM, all around the same time. Because I remember my boss at that time, they plucked him in from Procter & Gamble, and he told us, yeah, I was just working in my basement. That's how we rolled. And some organizations, like you said, they already had this muscle memory. It's been part of their DNA. So moving into fully remote or extending it further into the accounting department, into the logistics, into the shipping, into all different pieces of the organization, probably not a heavy lift. but certainly something unique, I think, is happening on the tech sector. So I dug in a little bit more just to do a little bit more research, and I wanted to be prepared for you today. So I looked at some of the better known companies today that are really enforcing the return to office. They're making a stance on this. Google. And in 2020, not too long ago, they announced, and this is kind of in your backyard, a San Jose downtown mixed-use campus. Facebook, right in Menlo Park. The Willow campus announced in 2017. Amazon, HQ2, which is literally kind of in my backyard here in Virginia, announced in 2018. They've only completed phase 1. Phase 2 is on pause because of the current situation. JP Morgan, in 2018, they announced 270 Park Avenue, headquartered in New York City. It's going to be one of the tallest buildings in New York, scheduled to open in 2015. Apple, also kind of in your backyard, Cupertino offices, beautiful offices that are, I believe those have been already opened. And in 2020, Twitter with their lease of 1330 Broadway. I would love to hear your perspective on this. How much of an impact is the actual commercial real estate factor when thinking about this? If you're sitting down and you're Zuck or you're the CEO of Google or Tim Cook and saying, we put in a couple billion. That building that JP Morgan, by the way, is building, estimated at $3 billion.
Yeah. Put Salesforce on that list too. They built that huge tower in San Francisco.
Exactly.
Right?
How much of this is actually weighing in a decision and saying, let's bring them back in versus, you know what? Like Kevin, we made 20% more profit margin. I'd be a dummy not to want to make more money.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it is huge, but I don't think we can also ignore. It's interesting. So I was with Cisco Systems before the dot-com bubble burst. This is like 99, 2000, 2001. I started in 98. At the time, Cisco was one of the largest commercial landowners with about 40,000 people before we let go a whole bunch of people in the dot-com bubble burst. And the lease of all those buildings turned into be an albatross for us. We got stuck with that. And that after the dot-com bubble burst, it went to more of a leasing strategy versus own the real estate strategy. I think all the companies that you listed fundamentally appreciate, as much as any industry, if you will, if you want to put them in an industry, technology industry, that this is all about talent. If you want to win whatever markets they're all playing in, it's all about talent. Mm-hmm. And so that is the key consideration. And I think what they're more thinking through is, how do we optimize the creativity and innovative capacity of that talent more? That's driving more of the decision than a entrenched real estate cost, right?
I see.
I also want to throw in something that is invisible and people are not talking about a lot, that we need to sort of put on the table. And that is, I promise you, the mayor of San Jose, the mayor of San Francisco are begging these companies, please, you got to bring your people back. Our restaurants are dying. Our public infrastructure of, buses and metros and trains are getting slaughtered. No one's paying money to ride these things. The vitality of our city, infrastructure is crumbling because we don't have people coming in here spending money on dry cleaners, on restaurants, on all the infrastructure. They're begging these leaders because cities weren't built for this. And the tax base of San Francisco, which I pay a lot of attention to because it's just, around the corner here.
Oh, yeah.
That it's anticipated that they are going to have a loss of payroll tax revenue, which is driven by how many people working in the city. Right. And you owe the city a certain small payroll tax, somewhere between $750 million and $1 billion shortfall. Okay. That's material. In the last 2 years, 20% of the restaurants in San Francisco have just disappeared, gone.
Yeah. Yep. And Professor Nick Bloom would concur with you. This is one of the points he mentioned to me during my conversation with him recently, is that the big losers right now are mass transit, municipalities, and commercial real estate. Those three. But those can change depending on what what organizations and municipalities decide to do, because they're all built around having a city center where a lot of office space and people come in, right? Just like you said, payroll taxes. And we're at an inflection point. When he mentioned to me, he said roughly the same numbers you just mentioned, 20 to 30% are never going back. People that are living in Greenwich, Connecticut are not going to go back into the city. People that are living in Long Island are not going back into the city. People that are around New Jersey are not going back into the city. And so if you don't have to do that daily 1 hour commute from any of these points around New York City, I would imagine the same as in the Bay Area, right? People making that commute on BART and driving and all of the rest, or taking ferries, they don't want to do it, Steve. And now what I want to share with you is what the mayor of New York City recently announced that he's doing in order to change the direction of the city. And I'm hoping that more mayors take a cue from this. Go ahead and cue that up, Ori.
Empty office space we have sitting idly by with ready and willing participants to develop the housing, and we are in the way. Well, it's time to get out of the way so we can turn these office cubicles into nice living quarters so that we can address the housing crisis we have.
Right. And so this is exactly what you're talking about, Steve. I'm sure, just like you said, I'm sure the pressure is great from folks like the mayor of New York City and others. Hey, you got to try to bring the people back so that our restaurants can thrive, our people could be here. Obviously, the tax is one thing. And he goes on to say, oh, we got another clip. Okay, go ahead and show that other clip, and then we'll have a back and forth after this other one. Go ahead, Ori, roll that.
Million square feet of office space. This is roughly the size of the entire city of Philadelphia. That's how much real estate we're talking. It will allow us to create 20,000 new homes, enough to house 40,000 New Yorkers.
Now, this is not tiny. This is a big number, 40,000 people. I think he said 136 million. Is that right? That I think I heard him say square feet, roughly the city size of Philadelphia. This is the kind of innovation that more cities and towns need. The people that are out in the suburbs, not everybody's going back. Let's put those places to work back in the suburbs. At the same time, city centers can redevelop. City centers can thrive. We got to then do something about all that empty office space. What do you think about that, Steve?
I think this is the magnitude of difficulty for cities to do this, and the cost is extreme. And it's also a sort of a one-way path too. So I was in Calgary and Toronto a lot this past spring and summer. They're going through a massive urban revitalization. And the problem they have is the same problem New York's going to have, same problem San Francisco's going to have, is buildings, windows are on the outside and all the bathrooms are on the inside. And if every city's got building codes that say you need to have a certain amount of windows, and for a living space, okay, for people to to meet the standard of this, these are proper living quarters. And so they've almost got to tunnel a hole in the middle of these buildings to have light and sunshine capacity to sort of come in. And the reconfigurability it's not trivial. It's really
not easy. Yep. And
the other thing is,
go ahead.
All the infrastructure, like things like daycare centers and things like open space and non-toxic parks that are nowhere near gasoline and underground storage, tanks of toxic stuff. Like, that's really hard to do. My mom opened daycare centers and helped cities and urban centers with this. And she's like, Steve, you don't understand all the standards that are for child safety and all these other things. So it's a great idea. I think they don't have a choice. But if you reconfigure all those offices, you're taking a bet that work and companies are not going to come back to the same degree. Are you ready to do that right now? Are you ready to do that as a city? Because that means all your revenues coming more from businesses and commercial enterprises than they are from residences. Are you ready to do that at the scale some of these people are doing. What's the right mix? It's like,
But what
lots
choice
of
do you have?
things.
I think right now, which is what, I mean, and this press conference went on for about an hour. What's the choice? Millions of square feet sit empty for years because he goes on to say those people are not coming back. 20% of the workforce is not coming back to the city. You could say, well, just leave it as is. And I got something else from a commercial developer talking even more gloom and doom about this. And like Mr. Wonderful, same thing. He says 40% of his people would head out the door. And he said the number one reason, actually in that Kevin interview, he says the number one reason they would leave is because they feel these employees that are saying they're not coming back if forced to the office is because the carbon footprint. This is the one small way each individual at his companies has reported they can contribute to reducing the carbon footprint is by not having to jump in their car Monday through Friday, come into the office. And it's hard to argue against something like that. But the reality of what you're saying is correct, because Dr. Ellen Frank Miller had mentioned this to me. She said the architecture firms that are already retrofitting building already tell her that it's very challenging to do, can be done. A handful of companies have already been doing it, and they stand to benefit from doing that because they're already in a good position and know how to do this. There's this know-how, but it is a very difficult lift. But if you're Mayor Adams, and like the numbers you're saying, $500 million, probably even more in New York City because it's even more concentrated.
Yeah,
that you can just leave it empty, hope for the best, but maybe do something that could change things around. Put people back into affordable housing, which New York is notorious. Imagine trying to live in downtown San Francisco. Forget the problems they're having with crime right now, but the cost of living, it's unaffordable to most people. It's unattainable. So in the case of Mayor Adams, he says a lot of those houses are going to be affordable living for people. So they could be in the city, shop, spend, live, play in downtown without having to commute in from the Tri-City area or the Metro County area.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, New York, and I think technology cities like San Francisco, Seattle, it's different. Let's take a look at places like Cleveland, Ohio. So Cleveland sits on Lake Erie, you know?
Yep.
Are there any parks? Are there any restaurants? Are there any, living quarters there? No, because that was built for the urban center in a lot of the heartland cities of America to be, that's where industry is. That's not where you live. And a great city to look at who's been trying to sort of thrive since the automobile industry has really struggled is Detroit. Look at what Detroit is. It's a really interesting story of how they put millions and millions and billions in that. And it wasn't until Quicken Loans, the founder of Quicken Loans, is like, okay, I'm going to really, get creative here with the home loans for people. And we're going to throw, millions and millions of dollars into making this urban, really deeply urban environment livable. And they're starting to see a turn, but not at the pace that I think they would like. And the amount of money that cities are going to have to do to sort of become places where people want to live is like you said, it's a complex undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. The city centers we have today were built on the backs of World War II, right? In the 40s. A lot of the infrastructure, highways, it was all designed so people could live in the suburbs, more space and what have you. And then we had a flight out of the cities, right? Into the suburbs. It is going to take a reimagining of how we live today because people are saying, no, I don't want to live that way. I want to live and work closer, more meaningful, less carbon footprint. And so it is going to be a tough slugging on the business side for those companies that have big towers and spent billions of dollars in putting into the buildings, as well as the cities, because we're not in the 40s. And we're at an inflection point where workers, and I think that's what we're seeing this year play out, workers are saying, look, we contribute to the bottom line. We want to be part of the deal of also sharing in the profits. I think that's also mixed in here. And what I want to share with you is a clip that kind of gets to what I'm just talking about, where there is a disconnect. I think also, again, this is like an onion, I think. There's the commercial real estate. There's the workers wanting to be part of the discussion about profitability because they know they're contributing to the bottom line. And then there's this dynamics that's changing in the shifting of work and as you would call future work, where you have folks that are used to having and dictating the rules for how employee and employer relations go. And because of that balance starting to change, they're snapping back and reacting. Something came out today on Twitter, hot off the press. I want you to react because it gets to that issue. Go ahead and roll that, Ori.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
I say, he says, yeah, but I say, what? What are you talking about,
hold on. I need to call my financial advisor to make sure that we are investing in nothing that guy has any part of. Like, who is that guy?
He's the CEO of a property development company, Tim Gurner. And what I was stupefied when I was sent this morning because, okay, you're saying the thing out loud that maybe we thought was in the back of the mind of some CEOs, not all, right? Some. But the fact that he maybe fundamentally doesn't even understand that a 50% employment rate would take us back to Depression era unemployment, which is no good for anybody. Nobody wins when you try to maybe intentionally inflict pain. And to me, it just gets to this argument that's wrapped up in this remote work, which is employer-employee relations. Maybe there's some shifting of work, of power, of momentum in the favor of workers that want to live and work. I mean, workers want to work where there's some work fulfillment. And you're talking about inflicting pain via an unemployment rate that would completely create a catastrophic situation for every single one of his properties, including in that 50%. No, nothing would get done. People would have soup lines like back in the Depression. That's when we last saw unemployment at those rates.
You're already throwing furniture over there. He really got to you. Listen, I think what we saw in that small clip, and again, we don't have the full context of other things he may have said before or after, and it's definitely something that we can get all excited and aroused about. But listen, what I took from his tone is that he's taking no responsibility for the ownership of motivating, exciting, and getting his employees and managing his people. Oh, they're just a bunch of lazy, stop working. Like, you have no control over that. Like, you have no responsibility for presenting an environment where they can thrive. And you have no appreciation for other things that may be driving their concerns around maybe they're not spending time working for you because you don't really care about them, and they're worried about their safety of their parents. So I think that is a showcase of really sad leadership that sort of underscores. So when he said that right up front, I was like, okay, anything else you say is really not that interesting to me, because you are completely abdicating yourself for any ownership of showing any leadership here or responsibility. He didn't say, hey, it's on us to be places where people want to be and people want to deliver their best work. It's on us to understand the wellness revolution that, people are experiencing all kinds of mental challenges and stressors that, we need to be mindful of. And he's taking solace in, I can only lead when people are desperate. And that's sad to me. Yeah. And I don't believe what he's saying at all around his forecast or about his model of leadership. And And that I do agree with you, Ro. I think there are leaders that think like that because they're afraid. They've never had to learn that you can listen. I've worked in technology. You guys have worked in technology. You will not hire anyone if you lead like that in a tech company.
Yeah,
you
who
might
wants to run into that building and work for that guy?
Right. You might be able to in real estate. My sister, who's written, she's worked for a bunch of these commercial real estate companies, and she says the cultures are disastrous. It's command and control, and you're lucky to have a job kind of thinking. And
sounds like this guy.
Right. And in a labor constrained marketplace, if that's a position you want to take, I mean, thank you for giving us the memo that that's what you're all about. Now I decide not to work for you, you know? So thank you.
And the people, and if you were that type of individual that appreciated that type of leadership, then what type of an employee are you really? You know, I have a question, you know, for these organizations we had kind of pointed out that are, you know, have these mandates for return to work. And the internal conversations that we're having are, you know what, employees are going to choose to either stay or find an opportunity for them that lends them back a better work fit. Have there been employees, to the numbers that people might be concerned about, leaving these organizations as they're demanding this return to work? Are you seeing an exodus of employees choosing to leave and find other opportunities?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And this is largely in the knowledge worker and advanced knowledge worker community. Here's the other thing that we're also seeing, guys, and it needs to be included in our conversation. More senior talent, technical talent is going independent at a rate we've never seen before. Why? Because they can. I want to work for the greatest boss I've ever had, the guy in the mirror. That's who I want to work for. Moi. And so, and they can, and all the proliferation of platforms like Upwork that provide you the ability to, you know, find benefits, find work, market yourself, do your accounting for you. There's so many more of those right now that it's not just an employer-employee. The independence opportunity is also shrinking the available employees for these employers. So I don't know what that dude's talking about. The other thing that's really interesting, and we talked about this a few times over the last few months, Rolando, which is one thing that has really, we don't understand the long-term implications of, is when the pandemic was full on for about, let's say, 2 years, the amount of knowledge worker immigration around the world went to zero. In the United States, on a normal pre-pandemic year, we had anywhere between 1.2 to 1.8 million legal immigrant knowledge workers coming into our economy. That went to zero for almost every country.
Yeah, they shut the borders down, basically.
That's right. Borders were closed. And so that lack of infusion, combined with, in America, fewer people going to college, fewer people majoring in the same things, people being really scared by the student loan debt. You know, we 100%. Have, you know, the workforce, the ripple effects, I call it in my book, the aftershocks of COVID-19. We are still, you know, we're not through the woods by any means. We're starting to see more and more ripple effects of this. And you add to it the pandemic sort of changing psychology of like, why do I work? Like, we're asking this question we never asked before. Like, why am I working? Why do I work 5 days? Why isn't it 4? Why isn't it 3? Every company I know that's gone hybrid, every company will tell you, don't see anyone Monday and Friday, but they're in there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's just, you know, we're voting by our behavior that's what we want. We want a little more breath, we want a little more time, and we're not seeing a lowering in overall productivity from the stats that I'm seeing. Right?
No, you're right. You're right. And speaking of stats, I want to bring some stats to the table so that folks that are listening to this, because my goal here, Steve, is to take the information you have, empower managers, empower workers to go to their boss or their management or the C-suite and say, hey, guys, this is what is out there. These are the numbers. This is the evidence. This is the research that will get us better retention, that will make the bottom line better. It is going to take some new muscle memory for some organizations, but it can be done. And those organizations that are already doing it, like Kevin's organization and many, many others, are going to win. So how do we bring that playbook here? And that's what I want to do. So let me give some numbers and some stats. There was a study from Ergotron of 1,000 full-time workers. And what they found is that a total of 56% of employees cited mental health improvements, better work-life balance, and more physical activity as a result of being able to do remote working because they have more time for themselves. In my conversation with Dr. Ellen Frank Miller, she said to me, and I had not heard this before, but she's a scientist and studies numbers and the impact on management. And what she said to me, when employees are happy, is this kind of, I'm going to make the conversation really simple. When employees are happy, they self-report they're happy. The arc of that, you can directly connect it statistically, analytically to higher stock prices. Proven. This is proven. So if you have 90% of employees, like in a Fujitsu study we found, they say, in this case it was 74, said the office was the place to get work done. That was the preferred. That went down to 15% during the pandemic because people said, you know what, I get better work done at home, in my home office. So if employees are saying that, and then you get all this benefits like better mental health, better work-life balance, being more physically active, theoretically happier employees, the bottom line, like Kevin says, improves. And therefore, you can measure that in the stock price. And she said to me, you can measure it and you can see it because that's what all the studies are saying, even if you go further back in time before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I find that just fascinating.
Yeah. And I think there's another dimension to this too, which I'm trying to help leaders get more comfortable with. And that is cognitive science, behavioral scientists are telling us and showing us, and we have more and more research to suggest that diversity of work and more sleep really drives a really greater capacity to impact and create. And so I think we've learned this a lot in the last 5+ years around more sleep is, greater focus and greater ability to do more in a shorter period of time. But what we I think need to learn is this notion of diversity of work and experiences really contributing in meaningful ways to people making an impact. And that is good in a world where people are moving around and they're changing roles a lot. And more and more people are having dual roles, if you will, in organizations. That I think the points you make are really well taken, but I also think we need to get comfortable that, hey, just because things are a little bit crazy doesn't mean it's all bad, Right.
No, I agreed. We had on a guest recently, Rachel Cottom. Big props to Rachel. Again, she's in the trenches, so to speak, when it comes to this issue around diversity and inclusion. And she pointed out that when it comes to remote work, your workforce gets diverse immediately because now there's a bias. And she cited some numbers around when you're in person and you're hiring, your bias is towards hiring people that are good looking, they're attractive, they're taller, they're fitter. If all they're looking at is that square box, right? Mm-hmm. that you're in, that Dave's in, that I'm in, they can't tell if I'm 5'10" or 6'5". And she said that there's actually a penalty. I think it was $1,000 per year for males if you're below the standard height. So if you're 5'5", 5'6".
Oh, like a penalty as in you're not going to earn as much?
Exactly. Every year. And for women, I can't remember the number. Dave, do you recall, was it 3,000 or 4,000 a year when their BMI, their body mass index, was beyond the norm?
Yeah, so I don't remember the number, but yeah, they were tied together.
Yes. So for women, it's a greater penalty. So over the course of a guy who's 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", because you're below the average, 5'8" even, you're going to earn less when you have to do in-person hiring because of the biases that are built in with hiring. Whereas remotely, doing it virtually, that does away with that. You can't tell if somebody's 6'5". You can't tell if somebody is overweight when they're just looking at a box of your face and shoulders. And so it has an effect of diversifying the workforce for women, for minorities, for folks with disabilities, because they can set up an environment that is exactly tailored to them. So if they have a disability, their environment at home is going to be set up so that they can work more efficiently, set up so they can get to the bathroom or whatever the challenge that they're trying to overcome. Whereas in an office, that office environment is not really made for that.
Yeah. And, technology, especially in the last year, is facilitating leveling the playing field for some friends of mine that have ADHD or mild forms of dyslexia. I can go to ChatGPT and say, this is kind of what I want to communicate, and I'm really not a good writer. Can you, help me express this? And that is wonderful, right?
It is.
Disadvantaged people now have resources and tools to really give them an advantage, right? And college students are figuring out how to leverage ChatGPT, and college professors are like, how do I, make sure that the work was really done here? And it's putting pressure on things like, think about this, like, what are we teaching now? Because if I can find an answer to a question in a second, versus like when I went to college, you have to go to the stacks and find something and hunt it down and find
microfiche. Yeah, you had to go to was it in the library even, and you have to order the book from a different library to bring it in.
So what do I need to learn? Because I can find facts in a second. What's worth me learning? And I think it's comes down to growth mindset and curiosity and desire to solve complicated things, and also differentiating yourself from a robot or artificial intelligence is all the human traits that we have. But yeah, all these things we're talking about, it just is a whole tidal wave of new challenges. And I really feel for leaders. I was at a conference in British Columbia 2 days ago for non-technology company businesses, talking retail, grocery stores, mining, gasoline, refinery organizations, and they're just deer in the headlights. And so, and the great question I love asking leaders like this, and it's more sort of, hey, I think we need to recognize we have a problem before you start looking at me saying, help us with answers. The question I asked them was, do you think the proliferation of new industries is going to slow down? We have more new industries in the last 10 years than any 10-year period in history. Do you think we're going to have fewer in the future? And they said, nope. I said, okay, what are those new industries? They're new jobs, they're new careers, they're new career paths. There's new ways that people can earn a living that didn't exist before. Then I said, are you all experiencing higher turnover now than you've ever had? Yes, everyone. I said, okay, so we can talk about why. You can get all salty about the young generation, but let me ask you a bigger question. Do you think that is going to slow down in the future? Do you think in the future people are going to stay longer? And they said, no, absolutely not. I said, so not a single person in a room of 400 people said, oh yeah, people are going to stay longer in the future. Wow. I said, so those two facts, more new industries and more new career paths, and people are going to continue to leave faster. I said, how many of you have adjusted your talent strategy to expect people are going to stay shorter? Has anybody in here? Not a single person. And that's when they started looking at their shoelaces. Right. And so this is where I have gravitas for all those leaders that are struggling, because there's no benchmark, Dave and Rolando, for this. There's no moment in time where we did a 180-degree turn and there's no, handbook or
we're
map.
not there. We weren't around I wasn't around. You were around in the 40s when this happened to our industry. The Industrial Revolution changed the whole face of this country. Maps were created, highways were created, suburbs were created, jobs shifted from agricultural based manual labor to building cars, Henry Ford. It's a lot of precedents. It's just that you and I weren't around to be like, this is the playbook we used when we were at Ford and we set up the factory assembly line, right?
Right.
And it required new talent that was probably used to working on horse and buggies or working on the farm. And Henry Ford decided, I'm going to make an assembly line. And by the way, I'm going to pay them enough that they can buy my cars. Right. Yeah. And but so I think it does require some brave bravery on the part, like you're saying, some curiosity. Hey, look, there are things that are happening outside of our industry, and you got to be able to look at those things like, oh, wait, this is happening here. This is going to impact you. We're not on an island. Companies are no longer on an island. We're global. We're connected. We're interconnected. We're intertwined. And I think that leaders that understand that are going to come out on top. Their companies are going to thrive. They're going to be able to retain people. That means more to the bottom line. And I think they're going to be able to go into the future or get closer to the finish line. If I were to use that analogy, they're going to be closer to the finish line than those that are, like you said, looking at their shoes and not, what do I do? Because you can take action, at least do something. We're going to start. Let's put a program in place. Let's get our people together. We're going to figure this out. Like you told me at LinkedIn, you guys had, I don't know how many endless meetings till you figured out the strategy for meetings, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It takes that curiosity that let's put people together. But if you say, you know what, I don't know what the future looks like, but I know what the past looked like. Let's bring everybody back in. I don't know how long that's going to hold well for an organization that take that position.
Yeah. Dave, what was on your mind, man?
Yeah. So back to your point, Steve. So if you're talking to people about, how they've changed recruitment and retention, I've seen some interesting change. My son's 17 years old. He has a part-time job at Starbucks. He's worked there for about two years now. When I was 17 years old, I had my hourly job, and that was it. There was no vacation time. There was no benefits. It was minimum wage, maybe a couple of quarters, higher than that. But I feel that there might have been a change that Starbucks has done. For example, and this is good and bad, he's making as much hourly as some teachers are making, some teachers straight out of college. Mm-hmm. He does get health benefits. He's 17 years old. They're offering benefits, including like mental health type benefits.
Mm-hmm. Like how many hours a week is he working?
He's like
about
20.
Okay.
25.
Yeah, that's the minimum to be eligible for Starbucks. Yeah.
So they're giving him time off. He's telling me, he's like, look how much time I've accrued for sick time. I'm like, you're a part-time worker. Like, that's great. They treat you well. Other benefits included, he said, when I'm 18, Dad, I'm eligible to enroll for the 401k. And I am like, wow, it's I see the downside on the flip side of the coin, but to see a 17-year-old working and he is happy, he feels respected. He's they even give, check this out, they give their employees free Spotify, so like they are paying attention to some things for recruitment and retention. And maybe Starbucks is an anomaly because they're just so massive. I can see where smaller organizations, especially in retail, would struggle with that. But would you agree that that's kind of a change where, 10 years ago, that might not have been happening within that space?
Yeah, what I love about Starbucks, and I don't know if they're one of the ones, but many people before the pandemic, like the size of Starbucks that have many hourly workers, had hundreds of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. arguing for a lower minimum wage. Like, we're trying to keep that as low as possible, right? And those jobs disappeared when the people stopped going to work for these frontline roles. And now there's a lot more creativity. I didn't know about the free Spotify. That's genius. That is just genius. Like, what benefit can we give that costs us very little that we can negotiate with Spotify at scale for a really discounted rate? That's going to cost Spotify nothing to give away a few more licenses. And it's going to be a really cool benefit that's going to be a little stickier to keep our people there. But what I also love is, like, your son's seeing all, how a company's treating people, right? Mm-hmm. And that he's going to have a benchmark when he goes to a different place and he's treated differently, right? That's such a great anchor. My eldest son had a really interesting experience, and I did a few TikToks about it that got a lot of people responding. But he had two jobs that he was interviewing for, and this is his first experience working. Okay. Now, it took me till he was a sophomore in college to get him sort of into the workforce, but he wanted a summer job. He's got a car. He wants to pay for his gas. Okay. So he interviews two places. One place says, we'd like to make you an offer. Here's the offer. and you have a week to let us know. Okay. After 2 days, they called and said, what's your decision? And he says, well, I haven't decided yet. And they said, well, why haven't you decided? And he said, because you said I had a week and I'm looking at some other opportunities. And they said to him, ready for this? Well, we can pull that offer anytime if we want. And my son's thinking, you told me a week. I'm being honest with you, telling you I'm just looking for the best for me and my summer earnings here. And now you're threatening me. Mm-hmm. And that was the job he wanted. The other job was like, hey, we like you. It was with a retail company. He was going to be in the back office, just unpacking boxes, stacking shelves, and filling out on the floor if they were understaffed. He took that job because he was so turned off by how the recruiter tried to strong arm him, And it was I told him, I was like, listen, that's a great lesson for you, And by the way, that recruiter might not even be an employee. They might just be a contractor. But that, I think this is emblematic of the experiences that a competitive environment is creating for people, particularly in frontline. I love that example of your son, Dave. And my son, he had a good experience, and he was very flexible. A lot of times, someone was sick, they call him, say, "Hey, can you come in?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. What else am I going to do? Go to the gym or pick up hoops with my friends?" Like, sure, I'll go. And then I said, "Well, you did tell him you're a college student and you're going back, right, in the fall?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I told him that." So, and they were good with it. And he had this huge employee discount too, which he let us use, which was awesome. But cool. Yeah, I think it's I go to his university and say, how are you preparing students for this future right now? Like, how are you thinking about that? Are you, what are you preparing them for? Is it working for a company or working independent, or what are you thinking? And I think they're facing as many challenges as if not more than businesses and cities right now. Think about that.
Yeah, the landscape and need for workers have changed. I remember going to college. I graduated in 96. I felt coming out, I wasn't prepared for work. Right. I came away with some skills. I knew how to write better. I knew a little bit more about critical thinking. Mm-hmm. I worked in teams, like you were talking about. We're built for teams, right? Working inside of teams. And I felt like I understood how to work with people that are different than myself, which was where I went. We had a lot of international students and people that all look different. So not everybody thinks the same. We're not all a homogeneous group. But outside of that, the workplace is a totally different thing. The rules, the expectations, how do you move up, corporate ladder type stuff. The preparation for that wasn't anywhere in any class.
Yeah. Yeah. I spend a lot of time with my alma mater for grad school, USF, helping prepare students for things that no school really helps them with, which is, how do you deal with a boss that you don't get along with? How do you deal with, my first lesson in my first job was that I was working so hard to get stuff done. And I was the youngest on the team, and the people were in their like late 20s to, mid 40s, that the rest of the team took me out to lunch one day and they said, if you don't slow down, we will hurt you. Okay.
Because you're making them look bad, Steve.
Because you're making us look bad. And I'm like, what? I'm just trying to do my best. Aren't you all trying to do your best? And they're like, yeah, but we didn't go to college and you did, and it's not fair. So I said, okay, I can't slow down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you learn my tricks that I knew how to, short circuit this or short circuit that. And so, but there's so many. There's actually a business. There's a woman named Ali Danziger. She would be really cool to have on your show. Yeah. She built an entire company that teaches you all the things around how to handle a company holiday party, how to ask for a raise, how to deal with a difficult colleague, how to deal with that person in the staff meeting that's always talking over you. All those things that you're presented with that you're not ready for. And
let me ask you something. Let me ask you about an example. This happened to me. This is also a war story from corporate America. If I were to take a page out of your playbook, right? All right. You call it stories from corporate America. I'm calling it a war story from corporate America. So I was working at Altria. I'd just gotten promoted. I used to live in Minneapolis. I got relocated to Houston. Gave me a package, promise, start moving up the corporate ladder. First day on the job, new boss says, And I had interviewed with him prior to moving. So I thought, okay, good. Like yourself, I was the youngest in that department. Everybody else was a good 20 plus years older than me. Everybody. First day on the job, boss says to me, everything you learned in Minnesota, you're not going to use that here. So don't worry about that because that's completely useless. And we're going to run it the way I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, what did you hire me for? If you knew what my pedigree was, what I did over there, he had all access to all the records, right? All the HR, everything else, all the numbers, all the metrics, it's all there. Now you're telling me I've got to not use that stuff here for fear, I think, now that I'm much older, for fear that I would take his job.
Right.
But
right.
Here's what I say to that. I don't want his job. I wanted his boss's job, not his job. But how would you react to that, Steve? You've somebody in HR. If somebody came to you with that story, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that is when you have a combination of someone who has power and insecurity, that's very, very dangerous. It's a very dangerous place to play. What I would have done, what I would suggest to you was, have you talked to other people that have worked with this person for a period of time or who used to work for them? And maybe they can give you some insight on how to influence. Then I would say, who does that person listen to try to help? And then I would say, my cue for you would be to say, and this happens a lot, like, listen, the quality of leadership in the world is pretty lame. I have very high standards. Okay. So, but that's an opportunity for you to shape that person to be the leader that you want. So you say, listen, I know I may threaten you. I may make you feel uncomfortable. I have no desire to take your role. But if you help me, I can make you look like a star. Let's work together on this. You benefit, I benefit, or you put me in that little corner. It's not going to end well for either of us. So which way do you want to go? Right. That's where I would have tried to present some alternatives for you to try to solve it, but also for you to say, like, I had a friend of mine who was over at, I don't know, fill in the blank, eBay, PayPal, one of those companies. And he's like, Steve, my manager's horrible. She doesn't know what she's doing. She just never meets with me. She talks over me. She doesn't care what I'm doing. And I said, why do you think that she would? Like, why do you and why don't you tell her what you need, what you want, and what you can do? And you own that, don't wait for her to sort of figure it out because the company's not helping her, and they put her in that role and that's on the company. It's not on her. And if she's a bad leader, there's more around the corner because other people that hired her hired other ones. So you need to figure out, is this system that has lots of bad leaders going to work for you? And can you take advantage of that? And if you can, you're golden. But if you're going to keep waiting for, they should be really great, then you're going to be constantly unhappy.
Yeah. Love that advice. That is freaking awesome. I wish you were around. I could have been like, Steve, I'm having a problem. Help me out. I don't know what to do. And I really was like, it was like somebody punched me in the head. And
I know. And it's an unexpected thing. Like when my teammates took me to lunch and I was like, what? I was just doing my best. Like, you guys want to hurt me?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's keep it on that light note. I know you're writing a new book.
Yeah.
You gave me a teeny little taste of it last time you and I talked on the phone, and I want you to talk about it. What is it? What do you got? What's going on with the book? What do you have in it? There was a lot of that changed since you started writing the Workquake book. What's going on, Steve?
Yeah, I would love to set aside some time to talk to both of you more and get your input because I think you could provide some good examples from your own experiences. So what I'm trying to do with this next book is help companies and leaders and organizations address a talent supply shortage. Okay. And what I'm trying to do is open eyes of leaders to recognize that just because you're not able to find as many people who are qualified with 90% of the skills you need doesn't mean that you face an impossible future. And what I'm trying to do is use my experience from LinkedIn and many experiences since then to show when we were building LinkedIn, which was a new industry, there wasn't a lot of entrenched knowledge around how to build the kind of models that we were building. So we had to put people in roles and opportunities that they'd never been in before, that didn't exist before. And guess what happened? They were fired up. I get to solve something new. You're giving me a project that I'm not, quote, qualified to do. wow. And what I found in talking to executive after executive is when you ask them, what's the biggest break in your career arc? It's always that one time when someone took a bet on me that I wasn't really ready for. I didn't think I was ready for. I was put into a new circumstance and I was so excited, and I did better than I thought, and I did better than they thought I would. And I'm trying to help businesses understand that we have to design for that. We've designed to prohibit that from happening. Stay in the same job for a long period of time so I have confidence you know how to do it, and I've got reliable results, which comes from a good place. But in a world where you can't find as many qualified people, I think if we take bets on people, and that's what Silicon Valley is. Think about it. There's more people in the world in this geography where I live right now doing something they've never done before, building a new industry, building a new space. And guess what? There's more innovation. There's more creativity. There's higher market value here. There's more successful firms in the density of this, footprint of geography than anywhere else in the world. So what I'm trying to say is that's out of necessity if you want to build something new, and organizations can really leverage that, in ways. And I'm not saying, hey, in the surgical center, we need to throw in a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing. I'm not saying that. But in many other places, you can do it. And speaking of hospitals, I was with a hospital system a few months ago, and I said, tell me something you've done in the last 3 years because of the pandemic that forced you to do something you've never done before. And they said, well, Steve, we put new grads in the ICU and the emergency room. We've never done that before. And I said, how'd it go? And they said, well, we had to re-engineer onboarding. We had to really give someone a lot more coaching and help. We were worried that they would be scared and shocked by the blood and guts that they saw or the trauma that they saw. But that's not what happened. They were so excited that we trusted them to be in this environment. They brought a whole new level of energy to the culture and the team and a lightheartedness that everyone was so motivated to try to coach this new person, because usually people in the ICU and ER have all this experience, and all those people never get to coach someone, and all the energy of the existing team was raised because they got to coach someone new. And I said, so your lesson is that's going to work for you longer term, even if we get through the supply shortage. Yeah, it's really, really great. And that's that kind of example that we need to do.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Right.
It's a great story.
And you know what, Steve, you remind me of something that somebody had said to me not too long ago, that the trend for jobs, the roles, because there's a race to try to get to low cost on everything. The jobs have been dumbed down so that anybody could do it. But it's at the detriment to the organization when you can actually, what you're saying, engineer the job so that it meets what we need. And then you get people in roles that are more satisfied, more fulfilled, and the organization benefits from that whole thing. Rather than, let's make it so it's, $8 an hour job and we dumb it down to that, and nobody wants those jobs anyways. Right.
And I think that gets to the last part of my book that I want to hammer home here. And I think it's relevant to our conversation, which is in a supply constrained future of work, every company is going to have to learn how to build talent, not just hire it. You're not going to find it on the open market. So you've got to be a place that's growing people. And by the way, that's the number one thing that people tell me they want when they look for a new job. I want a place where I'm going to grow. And people have always said that, but it's even more pronounced now in a place where the shelf life of a company maybe is shorter than it's ever been. People getting disrupted, new technologies coming in. So don't promise me a job. Promise me you're going to make me better for my future. And that's a reason why I might stay with you longer.
That is, again, totally worthy of another talk. The future, it can be bright. That's what I hear you saying. I'm looking forward to that second book. When is it going to hit the shelves? Are you still in the writing process?
Too early to say. Yeah, too early to say. Yeah, probably 25, maybe 2025. Yeah.
Wow, that writing process is a bear, right?
Yep.
Wow. Well, keep me informed. Keep us informed. I'd love to contribute in any way, shape, or form you need. I'd love to have a call with you on that. Whatever I can do. You don't even have to hesitate to ask. It's an open invitation. So we've been talking to Steve Cadigan, super guru coach to Fortune 500 companies, author of Workquake, world-renowned speaker if I could put it that way, and in all workplace issues. Dave, was there something that we left unsaid or a stone that we need to turn before we let Steve go?
Listen, I'm looking forward to your next book, Steve. I think what you're talking about here is important. I wouldn't be surprised if right when you think this next book is done, I hope nothing else happens where you have to go back to it, because that was an interesting part with Workquake, right? I remember you had said that you had basically had it finished and then the pandemic hit and now you had to kind of revisit that. So with things changing so quickly, there's always that possibility where you might have to go back and add another chapter.
Yeah, 100% agree, Dave. Yeah.
And if you want to nerd out on more of Steve Cadigan, we've got other episodes of Steve on our circuitloops.com, as well as wherever you consume your podcasts, along with other guests like Rachel Cottam that talked about the state of remote work. And be on the lookout for the future conversation with Professor and economist Nick Bloom from Stanford, as well as Dr. Ellen Frank Miller. So thanks for joining us today, and Dave and I will see you in those episodes. See you next time.